towards specific positions of the sun through the year, the solstices, the equinox, there is what they call a calendar circle. It's a kind of mini Stonehenge in the desert. Very intriguing. When he examined the position of the stones, he found that they were aligned to the critical stations of the sun at the solstice, the equinoxes. But where it became really interesting is that the long alignments, there are stones that go for about 500 meters in a row, various, shooting off a center point like spokes from a wheel of a bicycle, if you can imagine, shooting towards the eastern horizon. When he did the calculations to find out where they pointed, he found out that they pointed towards star risings. And here came the big shock, is that the stars that these primitive astronomical centers pointed to were the very stars that the pharaohs aligned their monuments, and particularly the pyramids of Giza. He found that they were aligned to the constellations, stars in the constellation of Orion, and the very bright star in the sky, Sirius. And not only that, it wasn't just the alignment towards these stars, is that they tracked the stars. These people were there, we know this from the carbon dating, for several thousand years. They populated this place, which is called, by the way, the Napta Playa. You'll hear a lot about Napta Playa. A lot of people think it's in South America because of the name, but in fact, it's 100 kilometers west of Abu Simbel. It is the remains of a lake that used to exist there, because the Sahara was very fertile in ancient times. And these people came there about 7,000 to 8,000 BC and stayed there for several thousand years. We know that they were there at least till 3,400 BC. A long, long time. And what's emerged from the examination of these stellar alignments of these stones is that they tracked the changing position of stars over thousands of years. It was the very first time that we found evidence of this kind of sophisticated astronomy in ancient cultures. Never before and never anywhere else has this been found so far. Of course, those who were studying the ancient Egyptian culture, and particularly the astronomy of the pharaonic culture, realized very quickly that there was a link here. What was intriguing was that when these unknown, mysterious people of the Sahara disappeared, we stopped seeing presence of them in 3400 BC. It is precisely the date that the pharaonic civilization rises, fully formed, with a fully formed astronomy, with a fully formed architecture, indeed with a fully formed everything. And this has always mystified historians and researchers, and particularly the new breed of archaeologists that have argued for years and years that it's very difficult to accept that a fully formed civilization springs literally in a matter of decades. And now we are beginning to suspect that the rudiments that spawned the Egyptian civilization is indeed from Egypt itself, but comes from that area of the Sahara. One thing we'll all have to accept, because this is what I'm about to tell you in a minute, is the ethnic origins of whoever these people were. Now the mystery so far is that we haven't found them. We found their remains, we found their alignments, we're finding their artifacts. What I'm about to tell you is even more things that we found in this region, but we haven't found them. We haven't found them yet. They're there, for sure, there's tombs, but we yet have not found them. We are very, very keen to know their ethnic origins. We want to know who they were and where they came from. Having said this, I now come to another story, which now will meet this one. And this is a very interesting historical story. It's becoming, I think I would write a novel about this because it's so romantic. In 1920, after the First World War, and when aeroplanes became the new technological idea of travel, I'm talking about very early days, suddenly we began to realize that we could perhaps explore these unexplored areas of the world. It's quite amazing that until the 1920s, the Sahara was not explored. and particular place that I'm about to tell you about. In the extreme southwest of the Egyptian Sahara is a region we call Gilf Kibir and Jebel Uwainat today. Let me describe it to you, because I've been there in April. It is, first of all, let me describe you where it is, how far it is, because when one looks at a map, we get a very distorted idea of the distances, especially these days. I mean, I just came from Madrid, and I feel like Madrid is just next door, but it isn't. You know, we have a very distorted vision of our world because we travel so fast these days. But in order to get there, even today, we had to leave Cairo to reach the oasis of Dakhla, which is the name implies the entrance, the Dakhla, which was the old entrance to Egypt through the old caravan routes coming from places like yours here. They entered Egypt from Dakhla, and you exit Egypt from Dakhla. And there is another oasis called Kharga, which is the exit. If you look on a map, you'll see that Dakhla is bang in the center of the Egyptian Sahara. And it takes about 6 to 7 hours by car from Cairo to get to Dakhla. You have a good tarmac road to get there. But from Dakhla, further south, west, it's open desert. Nothing. You're in the open sea here, the open sand sea. Literally the sand sea, because we actually call it the sand sea. Starting from the Mediterranean, from the oasis of Saloum, in the Mediterranean coastline, there is something like 600 kilometers of dunes. We have the biggest terrain of dunes in the world in this part of Egypt. It's literally a sand sea. But starting from Dakhla, you have another 600 kilometers to reach the Jebel Uwainat region in Gilf Kibir. It takes 5 to 6 days with 4-wheel drives in the open desert. Let me tell you, by the time you get there, you feel like you've reached Mars. And since I'm talking about Mars, it does look like Mars. It's a very strange area. You have traveled on dunes and relatively flat plains, and suddenly, like a giant iceberg, this mountain region springs out of the desert. It's a wonderful place. If you can imagine Switzerland without the trees, it's a kind of Switzerland without, it's actually the size of Switzerland. It's quite amazing that it was only discovered in 1926. It was discovered by an Egyptian, wonderful, enterprising man, I'll give you the names later on, but, who did the first deep Sahara exploration by camel in 1926. He started in Saloum on the Mediterranean coastline and did what nobody ever did before. In a sense, it was the equivalent of a moon landing. Nobody thought that you could travel that far in the Sahara. And he reached, after several months of travel, Jebel Uwainat. He discovered Jebel Uwainat. He actually called it Uwainat. By the way, it means the little springs, the little eyes. Because at the time, there was still a few little springs about. There is no water at all on the way there. You have to take your water with you. There is not a drop of water. There is nothing. We traveled for 6 days in 4-wheel drives, and there is absolutely nothing. You have to depend entirely on what you take. Of course, I'm preaching to the people who know this. I mean, the desert travelers are very aware that you have to take everything with you. But it comes as a shock, really, because you're so accustomed to opening a tap or lighting a light, or there's nothing. Nothing at all. But when you get there, let me try to explain what it feels like. You feel like you've arrived on planet Mars. As a matter of fact, which is true, NASA used this area to actually study Mars because it resembles Mars so much. They actually studied it. And one of the consultants is Farouk El-Baz, the famous Egyptian scientist, who is actually working at NASA, and he is the one responsible for the study of this area. They actually studied it by satellite because it does look like Mars. It looks like Mars. It's amazing. But it's Mars with a difference. It is Mars, when you get there, you really get the hit here. Because there's